I discovered 8 creepy Taco Bell horror stories that will haunt your dreams forever. I never should have opened that door. The air smelled stale and cold. My heart raced. I was just looking for a snack after a long day, you know. I walked into my local Taco Bell, expecting the usual chatter of late-night customers and the familiar smell of seasoned beef. But there was something different. Shadows danced on the walls, flickering under the dim, flickering fluorescent lights. I shrugged it off. But then, whispers. I turned to see if someone was talking, but the place felt empty, claustrophobic. I peeked around. Tables and chairs sat still. The silence was thick, wrapping around me like a damp blanket. I ordered my usual a crunch wrap and a side of cinnamon twists. Simple enough. But as I waited, a strange noise echoed from the back, a low growl mixed with something that felt almost like a scream. I felt a chill run down my spine. Suddenly, the front door slammed shut. The sound reverberated, and I jumped. The staff behind the counter looked just as startled as I was. One girl, with wide eyes and trembling hands, glanced at me and whispered, "They're back." The tension in the air felt electric, like a storm was rolling in. I could barely breathe. Then I noticed a figure in the back, shrouded in shadows, just out of sight. My skin prickled. What were they doing back there? I tried to shake it off. I convinced myself it was just my imagination. But the growling grew louder, and the whispers intensified, weaving together in a chaotic symphony. I was frozen, unable to look away from the shadows lurking, as if something was calling me, daring me to approach. I could feel a weight in my chest, a macabre curiosity mixed with primal fear. Fear surged through me, as that figure began to step into the faint light. I could barely make out a face, twisted into an unsettling grin. Their eyes glinted like something out of a nightmare. That was when the power suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed everything. I felt my heart thumping in my throat. Panic surged as I heard the doors lock, the unmistakable click echoed through the pitch black. I was trapped. My fingers trembled against the counter, desperate for something solid. Then, a scream pierced through the silence, raw and desperate. I was breathing heavily now, my lungs fighting against the fear. The shadows flickered, and before I could see, the figure was gone. All I could do was wait for the lights to return. But what else would they bring with them? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Panic surged through me like a violent wave as the darkness wrapped around my body, its cold fingers reaching into the depths of my mind. The sound of my own breath felt deafening, every inhale and exhale blending into an echoing chorus of dread. The sensation of being watched clung to the air, a heavy presence lurking just beyond the reach of my fading sanity. Then, like a cruel joke played in the cloak of night, the lights flickered back to life, revealing the desolation left in their wake. Everything appeared the same, but something was wrong, perturbingly wrong. A heavy silence settled, broken only by the low hum of the fluorescent lights reluctantly flickering to life. The staff behind the counter stood frozen, their faces pale as if they had seen something unspeakable. I followed their wide eyes to the shadowy corner where the growl had emanated, and then I saw it. A trail of darkness snaked across the floor, nearly alive, flickering and writhing like a marionette on a string. It twisted and coiled, threatening to engulf the grocery bags left on the floor, tied like gifts waiting to be unwrapped. The sweet scent of cinnamon twists was barely there now, replaced by something rancid, like spoiled meat festering in silence. My stomach churned, an instinctive reaction to a predator closing in. A voice crept into my ear, soft and slithering. It sang my name, dripping with sinister sweetness. "Join us," it purred, promising something just beyond understanding. I turned back to the counter, searching the eyes of the staff for answers, but they were lost in a trance, fixated on the corner. The girl with the trembling hands was now motionless, her gaze wide and unblinking, transfixed by the insidious shadows. "Get out," I whispered, a flicker of rebellion clawing its way to the surface. "We need to leave." But as the words left my throat, the front doors banged against their frames, rattling cruelly as if pushed by an unseen force. A suffocating pressure built around me, my thoughts spinning a vortex swirling deeper into madness. The whispers grew louder, merging into a cacophony of voices, all chanting my name in a venomous chorus. I stumbled backwards, nearly crashing into the prep station filled with dull, glistening knives. They glimmered ominously under the flickering lights, like the teeth of a massive beast waiting to feast. At that moment, the growling returned, louder than before. It reverberated through my bones, a primal sound resonating with the terror that gripped my heart. Unbidden, the realization struck me this was not merely an entity, it was a hunger, a void seeking something to devour. And as the shadows elongated, pooling closer around me, I was forced to confront the bone-chilling truth. It was coming for me. In a surge of adrenaline, I turned and bolted toward the kitchen area, desperate for an escape. The sliding doors were locked tight, the air growing staler as the atmosphere turned heavier, as if the very essence of fear suffocated me. I could hear the yanking and tearing of something unseen dragging itself across the floor behind me, countless tiny claws scraping. My heart thundered in my ears as I spotted a door at the rear, marked "Employees Only." I raced towards it, body urging itself forward, desperate. Just as my fingers grasped the cold knob, a chill bitter as frost bit my skin, and instantaneously, the growling grew maddened, a monstrous roar surging through the building, shaking the walls. The door swung open, yet what lay beyond was not the safety I sought. A cavern of darkness stretched ahead, filled with shadows that danced unnaturally. With trembling hands, I stepped into the void, praying for the light to guide my way. But it wouldn't let go. Suddenly, everything went silent. The noises halted, the growling, the whispers, even my own frantic breath. An oppressive stillness swallowed the air, and out of the depths, a voice emerged, low and guttural, like 2 miles of gravel sliding against one another. "What are you doing here?" it rasped, echoing directly in my mind. I turned, stepping back just as a pulsating form began to emerge from the shadows, oozing forth like a manifestation of every nightmare that had ever haunted my thoughts. And then, at the edge of that darkness, I saw them. Countless eyes gleamed at me, red, brown, hollow, an infinite parade of horrors waiting to be unleashed. Before I could scream, the figure lunged, stretching beyond what should have been physically possible. I was not ready for what it would demand. The air thickened with a scent that shrouded my senses like a noxious fog. With unrelenting force, the figure lunged, its mouth widening grotesquely to reveal rows of jagged teeth glistening with venomous drool. I felt the icy grip of despair as I stumbled backward, slipping on something slick that sent me crashing to the floor. Panic surged again, an overwhelming tide crashing against my consciousness. I scrambled to my feet, the chilling voice still curling through my thoughts. "You must see," it rasped, pulling me into its terrible gravity. I forced my gaze away from the gaping maw, focusing instead on the walls of the cavern, if it could be called that, featuring grotesque images carved into the stone. Faces twisted in pain stared back at me, mouths formed in eternal screams, eyes that seemed to follow my every movement. I stumbled deeper into the darkness, desperate to escape its gaze. As I retreated, flickering lights began to loom above me, casting a deathly glow that exaggerated my fears. Shadows moved with me, elongating unnaturally, their claw-like fingers reaching for my skin. The echo of my own breath blended with a deeper, rhythmic pounding, like a monstrous heart hammering against the walls of this dreadful place. "Why are you afraid?" the voice crooned, mocking my terror. "You belong to us now." At that moment, a memory washed over me, unbidden, a scene from my childhood that had been sealed away in the depths of my mind. I remembered the stories a tale shared around campfires of the hungry ones, creatures that thrived on despair and the taste of fear. They lured people into the dark, feeding off their terror like succor. My pulse quickened with realization, this was the manifestation of those tales. Escape was nothing but a faint illusion. Shoving the memory aside, I hesitated as the realization struck the shadows weren't just alive, they trembled with sentience, a biting hunger drawing closer with every beat of my heart, the growling intensified, almost resonating with the rhythm of a chant, echoing back in repulsive harmony. I turned to run but found the way I came was gone, swallowed by the expanding darkness. Panic clawed at my throat, a choking reminder that there was nowhere to go. "We see you," the figure hissed, an unsettling rasp swelling into a storm of laughter crafted from malevolence. "If you want to survive, you must choose." The voice slithered through the darkness like a snake coiling around its prey. My heart thundered with both fear and anticipation, mounting pressure urging me to confront the impossible. But, it continued with a sickening glee, it must be a sacrifice. I turned to see the gleaming eyes, those countless, hollow, insatiable eyes widen in anticipation, gleeful yet dreadful like vultures ready for the feast. What do you want?" My voice scarcely broke the silence, emotion tangled in my attempts to comprehend the horror unspooling before me. "Your pain," the voice replied, equally soft and commanding. "Your fear vibrates within us, a melody we wish to play on repeat. But to join us, you must give up something dear." In my stupor, a realization took root. My friends, each one who had suffered, who had faced their own demons in their lives. They had come to the store with me, and I had believed we were merely shopping. But they had been drawn into this dark void, devoured by the very shadows that now beckoned. Despair wrapped its claws around my heart, squeezing tighter. I could feel the presence pressing in closer, closing the distance as I stood paralyzed by uncertainty. The shadows leaped forward, hungry tongues of darkness flickering around me, daring me to move. With a surge of determination born from desperation, I grasped for whatever sanity remained. If I was to face this horror, I had to confront the truth. "Take me instead, spare them!" I shouted, my voice breaking as I struggled to present myself as bait for the shadowed fiends. Silence descended, the shadows freezing mid-lunge, waiting. "Give us your voice, your power, and we will allow them to leave." Heart racing, I felt their hunger ensnaring my soul. The night turned colder as my mind fractured with the horror of surrender. My heart swelled with emotion, faces of my friends flashing before me, faces that did not deserve to linger in the abyss. But before I could agree to the unspeakable price, the ground trembled beneath my feet. A figure burst forth from the shadows, a silhouette bearing an unsettling resemblance to someone I knew, a friend I thought I lost long ago. The haunt of familiarity met with the spine-chilling horror of deceit that it smiled, toothy and glimmering, as if beautiful and horrific were but two sides of the same coin. "Don't worry, I've come to save you." And then that promise shattered as it lunged toward me, a figure glistening in the half-light, joined by echoes of others, emerging from the depths of darkness, all bearing that same sinister smile. As they surrounded me, the pounding crescendo of shadows and trapped souls swelled, darkening my vision until there was nothing left but that crippling fear. I had entered a nightmare I could not escape, and as their voices merged in horrified elation, I realized the horrible truth: they wanted more than just me, they demanded everyone I ever loved. And then, darkness engulfed me. As the suffocating blackness closed around me, I felt the warmth of consciousness slip away, consumed by the phantom whispers of my lost friends. I could feel their presence, just beyond the edges of reality, slipping through my fingers like mist at dawn. Tearing through the void, I struggled against the rising tide of despair. Figures surrounded me, their teeth glinting, eyes flashing with hungry malice, each one grotesquely familiar, faces I had cherished now twisted into mockeries of affection. "Join us, become one with the darkness," they sang in unison, their voices melding into a haunting harmony that echoed through the cavernous space. "Feel the joy of sharing our hunger, of indulging our appetite." My mind screamed against the weight of their promises, memories of laughter and love clawing at my heart even as darkness beckoned. The semblance of familiarity was unsettling. These were not just ghosts, but shadows of the lives they once had, their anguish now interlaced with the very essence of darkness that rides in this abyss. I recoiled from the figures, but they moved closer, disdainful yet entrancing. The hunger in their eyes dilated, consuming them in a palpable dance of delight. "No!" I shouted, pushing against the parade of shadows, unable to differentiate between the specters of my dearest friends and their horrific alter egos. "You're not real. You're not them." The figures paused, their silhouettes flickering with ambivalence, the sinister smiles faltering just for a moment, revealing beneath the facade of distorted faces the agonized depth of their souls. But it wasn't enough. Doubt seeped through the cracks of my resolve, chipping away at my defiance. "Your denial only feeds us," the lead figure hissed, resembling my closest friend, Angela. "Embrace the shadows, and we can break the chains binding you to this world." For a brief moment, uncertainty flickered bright like a candle, and I saw the truth behind their glow. An unfamiliar terror swirled in my chest. Could they be right? Had they succumbed willingly to the hungry void? The glint in their eyes danced with seductive shards of longing, whispering sweetly, persuading me to surrender. Consider this, another silhouette intruded, this time a haunting likeness of my first love. "Mark, we can live forever in ecstasy. Let go of this cage. All you have to do is accept our embrace." Thrumming apprehension twisted within me as the shadows encroached closer, the bond of familiarity overwhelming my senses. I remembered our shared moments, their laughter, our hopes and dreams. It seemed impossibly cruel that the walls of love could entrap me in this hell. "I can't!" I screamed back, unwilling to believe the seductive siren call. "This isn't living." Their laughter spiraled into a cacophony, rising into a frigid crescendo that bore down upon me, smothering any rational thought. "You have nowhere to go. You must choose." In that moment of sheer desperation, I felt something shift within the churning void. A flicker sparked in the corner of my eye, a glimmer of silver against the raw umbra surrounding me. In a frantic whirl, I turned to face it, only to find another presence emerging. An ethereal light flickered like a distant star, illuminating aspects of the darkness that had become so familiar. "Run!" A voice shattered the ominous atmosphere, and at once, the figures recoiled, shrieking in dismay, their teeth bared in fury. The starlit figure stepped closer, an apparition of radiant hope, a stark contrast to the grim orchestra clamoring for my surrender. "Don't succumb to their hunger, they seek to bind your spirit." The tension shifted, engulfing the spectral forms in chaos, their haunting faces twisting into rage, now racing towards the light as if envious of its purity. But for all its radiance, the figure too emanated a disturbing quality that sent chills racing down my spine. Its visage blurred, forming features I could almost recognize. "Who are you?" I stammered, trembling as the shadows rallied in fury, and I felt the grip of despair tighten again, a gnawing reminder of what lay at risk. "I am what you fear, but also what you love," it rasped, a grin unraveling as the last flicker of safety dimmed. "But to escape, you must confront the horror of your choices." Before I could process its words, the shadows surged in a tempestuous wave, divergent voices shrieking through the void, unleashing a dreadful cacophony that clawed at my psyche. I had to make a choice: dive deeper into the shadows or cling to this flickering semblance of hope. The ground trembled again, ripping open beneath me, dark tendrils reaching up with infinite longing. In that moment, the last vestiges of my friends screamed out, their voices swallowed by the shadows, drowning beneath the sinister whispers that beckoned me to embrace oblivion. That I could feel the darkness clawing at my ankles, dragging me toward an abyss that promised control and power but demanded the ultimate sacrifice. "Choose, Hannah." The radiant voice echoed, desperation creeping into its tone. "Or suffer forever." And as the ground split further, swallowing my sound into the abyss, I could only hold on to the promise of salvation, trembling in the face of the impending truth, the ultimate sacrifice, and whether it would cost me everything or save us all. Then, silence fell, punctuated by a rumbling that echoed through the caverns like a heartbeat in the void. In that stillness pregnant with possibility, I realized that for every darkness, every truth, there existed a far more terrifying revelation. With a final surge of energy and fear palpitating within me, I gasped, preparing to make my choice, and in that fraught instant, the ground erupted beneath me, swallowing my scream as I plunged into an abyss that promised both freedom and doom. The air crackled with a suffocating essence of dread as I hurtled deeper into the ravenous chasm, the tumult of shadows clawing at my limbs. The thundering roar of the void enveloped me, overshadowing the pleas of my lost friends, their desperate cries echoing irregularly. I was falling through an abyss, or perhaps I was being consumed, a sacrificial offering to the insatiable emptiness that had so long craved despair. Suddenly, I landed with a heavy thud on solid ground. The impact jolted my senses alive, but they were greeted not by comfort, but by the pungent odor of rot. I struggled to my feet, blinking through the murky darkness that now surrounded me, feeling every nerve ending alive with foreboding. The chilling silence was palpable, broken only by a distant drip overhead. Unseen moisture mingled with the stillness, tapping against the unseen surfaces around me. "Are you here to join us at last?" A voice echoed, silken with malevolence, seeping into the crevices of my mind and planting tendrils of ice in my spine. The shadows danced at the periphery of my vision, swirling like a fever dream. I squinted, willing for something, anything, to come into focus, and then it emerged, a twisted form, barely human, contorted into a grotesque caricature of life. Its eyes, hollow yet luminescent, glared with an unsettling hunger, as it advanced, gliding through the darkness effortlessly. What are you?" My voice trembled, echoing in the void, and the figure responded with a grin that displayed a mouth far too wide, filled with teeth that gleamed in that unnatural light. "We are what remains when despair devours hope," it purred, moving closer, wrapping its grotesque fingers around a shard of my fragile bravery. "We were once like you, bright and full of laughter. But laughter means nothing in the face of such insatiable hunger. You've tasted the darkness, dear Hannah, and now it craves you back." My stomach twisted at the recognition of their words. The shadows were right. I had been drawn in, allowing the despair to pervade my thoughts. Panic surged through me, and I scanned the void, desperate for a sliver of light, for the radiant figure that had offered hope before. But I was utterly alone, choice evaporating in the fetid air as I faced this new terror. Stumbling back, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. A wave of clamorous whispers nudged against me like the blur of shadows closing in. They were pulsating with life, whispering a symphony of regrets, each note a reminder of what I had lost, a life filled with warmth, touch, love. "Join us, Hannah," they cooed, the malicious tone wrapping around me like a cocoon. "Together we can devour their memories, their hopes, until there is nothing left for them to cling to, until you become one of us. Immortal. Free to traverse this realm and the next." My heart thundered as each syllable throbbed within me, igniting a terrifying longing. The shadows knew me, understood the ruin I felt. But amidst that seductive pull surged a different memory, a fleeting image of Angela's laughter, Mark's soft hold, and the warmth of my living friends. I shuddered at the thought of their faces twisted into such wretchedness. "No!" I cried, shaking my head, determined to resist the intoxicating allure of the dark. But their shadows pressed in closer, coiling around me, forcing past my defenses. "You have the power to release them, embrace the void, and forget the pain. All of it can be yours." A clarity surged, and I fought against the tide of darkness. I recalled the figure enveloped in the brilliance of light, the flicker of hope. They could be remnants of my past. I needed only to tap into that deep reservoir within me, the dormant strength that yearned to break free. But before I could dwell further on that thought, the ground heaved violently, bits of earth and debris showering down upon me. A primal howl erupted within the shadows, and I felt something ancient awaken, something more sinister than I had ever encountered, angered by my defiance. "What have you done?" The creature screeched, voice laced with frenzy. As darkness undulated, transforming into twisted shapes, vast and grotesque, writhing together, coalescing into a singular heart of malevolence. Tendrils of shadow lashed out, wrapping around my throat, constricting, threatening to drag me down into the maelstrom of despair. Suddenly, the ground shattered again, fissures emanating outward, revealing a landscape of horrors: twisted trees laden with whispers, their branches gnarled like broken bones. Faces emerged among the roots, their expressions contorting in agony as they reached toward me, fingers clawing, mouths silently screaming. They were trapped, souls ensnared by their own despair. In that moment of terror, I realized the truth: the shadows thrived on suffering, feeding on pain, compelling me toward the very source of their grotesque existence. "Embrace the shadows!" the malevolent voice shrieked. "And join them!" With one final desperate thought, I launched myself from the precipice of despair, grasping for the last shimmer of hope I could muster. And as I did, the ground erupted with a cataclysmic roar, and the darkness responded with a chilling silence. A moment of in-between where possibility hung like a fragile thread. In that ephemeral space, I saw them again, a flickering image of my friends, their faces now balanced between light and falling shadows, whispering my name as they stretched toward me, desperately holding on. But beneath them loomed the grotesque figure, a shadow draped in a cloak of nightmares, snarl rippling across its face as if preparing to unleash its fury. "Choose, Hannah!" it bellowed, the ground quaking violently as the darkness twisted in on itself, closing the distance between life and despair. And as I braced myself against the consuming force of anguish, a single penetrating thought manifested: this was only the beginning of my terror. In a heartbeat, everything exploded into chaos as the darkness lunged forward, and with one last scream swallowed by the abyss, I panicked, caught between the luminescence of hope and the unfathomable dread of my choices. The darkness sealed around me like a stretching shroud, constricting my breath as if the very essence of despair had come alive, pulsing in time with my heart. I felt gravity shift as the world twisted around me, blending hues of shadow and dread into a seamless nightmare. Just as I lost awareness of where my feet stood, I was thrust into a macabre tableau, a shifting amalgamation of terror and voyeurism. Hovering apparitions materialized before me, faces I once knew distorted into echoes of their former selves. Angela's eyes, once filled with warmth, now shimmered with an abyssal void as a half-formed smile lurked beneath her pallid features. "Hannah," she crooned, her voice intertwined with the sounds of the wailing souls, a haunting melody resonating with my own guilt. "Why don't you join us?" We've been waiting behind her. Mark, his figure flickering like a failing light bulb, reached out imploringly. "This is where we belong. You can't fight what you've become. Just accept it." Their outstretched fingers beckoned, the tendrils of despair drawing me closer, whispering seductive lies about belonging and peace. But beneath the surface lay a festering truth: they were no longer the friends I cherished, but shadows puppeteering remnants of their humanity. I stood paralyzed, torn between their desperate summons and the gnawing instinct to flee. In that moment, the darkness gurgled with anticipation as if it sensed my inner turmoil. The grotesque figure loomed closer, its maw widening, hungry for my surrender. "Let their hope drown in your despair, Hannah. Just one slip, and all you cherish will be yours again." The gnarled branches of the skeletal trees trembled around me, their whispering roots splayed wide open, revealing sightless eyes that blinked with sorrowful echoes. They were hungry for renewal, feasting upon the very essence of despair that had anchored them here, bound by my own fear. "Help us," the souls implored, synchronized in their torment, their words an eerie chant. "Help us break this cycle." Somewhere within that thrumming chaos, a familiar voice surged, a mix of anger and desperation. "Hannah! Don't give in." It was Sarah, piercing through the cacophony, a lifebuoy in a sea of shadows. A memory sparked, the warmth of friendship ignited within me, reminding me of tides turning on the cusp of hope. Fight! Fight for what we had. The realization surged through me: I wasn't alone. I was tethered to something infinitely stronger than despair. A flickering petrochemical flame within my chest began to push against the suffocating darkness, illuminating a grotesque canvas alive with despair. "No!" I yelled, shaking off the claws of shadows that sought to diminish my resolve. "You can't take me." With every ounce of strength, I hurled myself towards the light that flickered amidst the chaos. The black mass roared again, an unholy mix of rage and hunger, slashing out at me as more twisted figures emerged from the depths, their despair coalescing into vicious whirlwinds. Tendrils wriggled, seeking to ensnare me, dragging me back into the chasm of sorrow from which I had clawed my way, but the flickering images of Sarah, Angela, Mark they bolstered me, adding fire to the spark igniting my will. I will rescue you, I proclaimed, even as despair licked at my heels, shrouding me in icy fingers. And in an act of defiance, I thrust my arms forward, as if reaching for the very light that beckoned. The ground trembled in response as ruptures split the earth, the horrified faces within the roots screaming in violent dissent. New specters spilled forth, eyes wide with unsettling grief, their cries mingling with the howling shadows swirling around me. Join us! Join us! They clamored, their voices rising in an anguished choir. You cannot escape what you are. Shut up! I screamed back, feeling my strength wavering against the oppressive tide. I'm not one of you. But the shadows widened their grasp, wrapping around my throat, restricting my voice, as if they reveled in my defiance. Bursting through the fabric of this void, I felt the collective weight of despair, the sins of the past, and the few flickers of hope trapped beneath it all intertwined in a dance of anguish. From behind me, a feral screech erupted, a resonance that felt ancient and potent. I turned, eyes widening in horror as the grotesque figure elongated, more monstrous than ever, its limbs reaching toward me, amalgamated with the shadows, a twisted parody of my fears and regrets. You are destined to join them, Hannah. The void hungers for you. And before I could react, the ground beneath me ruptured completely, spilling forth a hellish landscape, one of bright despair, corruption displayed in full garish detail. Unfathomable figures poured forth from the cracks, pouring into this world, feeding upon the living essence, each with faces I recognized, emotions translated into forms more colorful than the horrors of imagination. We were everywhere. They howled in unity, a deafening symphony quaking my very bones. Then, in a fleeting moment of clarity, I realized they weren't just mere phantasms of despair, they were the very essence of my memories, my life distilled into shadows, myths merging with the agony of abandonment. Just as realization dawned, the cacophony reached its peak, a deafening crescendo vibrating through the chasm. I was nothing in the face of their maddening chorus, the fragility of flesh and blood against the horrifying depth of unending despair. With a mixture of horror and clarity, I had no choice but to confront what lay ahead. Up ahead, the tendrils twisted and thrummed with eager anticipation, an unstoppable entity awakening more deeply within the void. Let us devour together. It roared, and as its gasp enveloped me, with that sinister declaration, I felt the chains of reality shatter like glass, and in a moment that stretched like eternity, just before I was engulfed whole, a primal understanding gripped me. I was already too late, the choice had eluded me long before. The air crackled with an electric tension as the spectral maw widened, drawing me in with an insidious hunger that chilled my marrow. I felt my sanity unravel in a futile attempt to escape. I clawed at the edges of the void, desperate to pull myself back to the flickering light of hope. But the whispering shadows grew louder, their voices melding into a symphony of anguish that thrummed against the inside of my skull like a relentless drumbeat. Join us, Hannah, they chanted, the haze surrounding me thickening into an impenetrable fog of despair. You are one of us now. With each pleading echo, a visceral cold seeped deeper into my bones. I was losing sight of the world I once knew, the vibrant colors fading to monochrome grays, the laughter of friends dissolving into agonized screams. They reached through the shadows, fingers grasping towards me, closer and closer, inching into my mind with thoughts of abandonment. I was a marionette caught in their web, threads of despair pulling at my limbs, ready to tether me to the past forever. Stop! I gasped, summoning a sound from the depths of my throat. The shadows faltered, momentarily recoiling as if a light had pierced their darkness. My heart raced. You can't drown me. I will not be consumed. But my fire flickered, and in that instant of defiance, the figures shifted closer, their faces twisting into grotesque masks of despair that painted agony into my memories. I could see the glimmer of familiar eyes once filled with kindness, now void of the warmth I remembered. "Hannah, why fight against what you were destined to be?" Mark pleaded, his voice a haunting echo of my past victories over fear. "Let go. Shut up," I screamed, struggling against the fetters gripping my chest. Instinctively, I threw my head back in defiance, calling upon every ounce of strength left within me. The shadows seemed to ripple, recoiling from the raw desperation I emitted, an inexplicable force that burned against the encroaching darkness, yet, they tightened their grip. "You cannot resist forever," Angela whispered, her lips curling into a smile that was more graveyard than gleam. "We've seen the heart of the darkness, Hannah. It offers freedom, love beyond measure. All you'll need to do is embrace it." "But I don't want your freedom," I barked, swinging my arms in wild desperation, feeling the wind of my own fervor push against the intangible walls of my prison. "I want my life back. I want my friends." As I fought against the dense fog of sorrow, the escape I sought lay only steps away, a fractured path shimmering in the shadows beneath a tattered veil of moonlight. I fixed my eyes on it, longing for salvation, the very essence of hope flaring within my chest like a dying star, and yet, with every flicker of determination, more faces twisted from the darkness, emerging as wraiths, each one bearing silent testimony to the pain I had unknowingly stitched into the fabric of our past. The specter of regret materialized, standing before me with hollow eyes and peeling skin, its existence a relentless reminder of my failures. "You can't leave us, Hannah. We're intertwined, bound by what you have shed," it rasped, voice echoing like a forgotten prayer. "Embrace your legacy." "No," I bellowed, my voice trembling with the weight of truth. The ground shook beneath our feet, the earth stuttering in rhythm with my pounding heart. How could I save them when I could barely save myself? Each word transformed into a physical entity, cutting through the oppressive silence like a knife. The ground heaved below, and the air became thick with nascent dread, a pulse emerging beneath the surface, a dark life of its own. With a sudden jolt, tendrils of shadow shot forth, snatching at my limbs, pulling me back as if grappling against my resolve. "Stay!" they screeched, voices twisting into a horrifying cacophony, colliding with the last remnants of hope that flickered in my heart. "Don't leave us behind." Just when I thought the tendrils would engulf me completely, my gaze met Sarah's apparition, standing defiantly ghostly against the tide of gnarled hands. "Together, Hannah!" she shouted, and the intensity in her eyes rekindled something fierce within me, a tether to the living world, a fierce battle igniting my spirit. With a breath of fiery determination, I drew upon Sarah's strength, stoking the flames of resistance in my soul. "I will not be chained to my own despair," I shouted, voice merging with the resistance of the universe around me. Suddenly the ground erupted in a fissure, darkness pouring forth and heaving with malevolence. The core of all my nightmares writhed just beneath the surface, as blurred faces and spinning forms spiraled around me, each vying for my allegiance in a grotesque ballet of confusion, and just when I thought victory hung within reach, a deafening roar sounded, vibrating through my bones, an abyssal hunger that lashed at the edges of my sanity. I was being pulled back, the void consuming my pleas for freedom, and then I saw it, something darker, a shape forming in the chaos. A shadow loomed larger than the others. It was no longer a specter of regret but a monstrous entity cloaked in darkness, the embodiment of every fear I had ever known. With bone-chilling clarity, its eyes locked onto mine, glistening with an insatiable hunger only the damned could comprehend. As I stood frozen in the face of such terror, the ground beneath me trembled violently, fracturing like an egg ready to unleash its horrors. The monstrous figure grinned, and with a menacing swiftness, it began to surge forward. "Your time is up, Hannah," it hissed, a voice across lifetimes, dripping with malice and terrible certainty. "Embrace the darkness, and all shall be revealed." And in that soul-pulverizing moment, I realized the nightmares weren't just hunting me, they were whispering truths I was too afraid to recognize. Just as the window toward freedom was closing, the shadows spiraled tighter. I gasped as sharp claws encircled my throat, choking the remnants of defiance from my lips. With one last scream echoing my name, the earth beneath me shattered completely, and I plummeted into the eternal depths of night. In a blinding whirl of darkness, I understood I was not the hunter, I was the prey. The stench of decay embraced me as I fell, the taste of dread thickening in the air around me. My body, suspended midair, was swallowed by a void that thrummed with an eldritch pulse, each heartbeat more sinister than the last. Time stretched like taffy, and all the while, the echo of my scream was swallowed by an unnerving silence, as if I had been consigned to a realm beyond sound, beyond time. The darkness finally spat me out, landing me onto a surface as cold and unyielding as death itself. I lay there, gasping for breath, the thick fog still clinging to my skin like a shroud. A low groan reverberated through the ground, a damp, joyless sigh that hinted at something ancient writhing just beneath the surface. I pushed myself upright, wincing against the sharp pain radiating from my scraped palms and bruised knees. All around me extended an endless landscape of shifting shadows. The very ground seemed alive, swirling like a tempest, each errant gust carrying with it the fleeting whispers of those I had lost. I could barely focus, the air heavier with their desolation, the echoes of their tormented souls clawing at my mind as they searched for absolution. Hannah, they beckoned softly, a faint caress of sound that turned bitter as it sunk into my being. Join us. As I stood, dread melded with confusion, I was still caught in that sunless realm, but now the shadows retreated, revealing disjointed fragments of memory splattered throughout this ghastly terrain. I stumbled toward a clearing, the boundaries pulsating with a malevolent energy, a grotesque diorama I had no choice but to witness. The figures took shape before me, rendered into scenes of anguish. I watched, paralyzed, as one memory unfolded. There I was, dressed carelessly for a winter party, clutching a glass, laughing with Mark. Beneath it all lay the reality I had buried, the tension that simmered, the jealousy that sparked between others, the shard of betrayal I had brushed away for the sake of friendship. Like pages torn from a cursed tome, flashes of my past swirled around me, merciless and vivid. I stumbled back as a chilling wail erupted, sending shadows screeching into the air. Memories of an accident, a night where chaos danced with destruction as laughter faded into dread. Sarah's face twisted in pain, hands outstretched for help, but I had been paralyzed with fear, too late to save her. They are craving to be freed, Hannah. They are tied to you, a voice hissed from the malformed trees surrounding me. The bark twisted and entwined, gnarled faces emerging from the wood, their shrieks forming the spoken wreckage of my nightmares. Shadows enveloped each figure. These were not mere ghosts, but echoes of my unforgivable deeds. I recoiled, trembling as tears streamed down my cheeks, blending with the cold vapor that wound around me like a serpent. What do you want from me? I pleaded, struggling against the rising tide of guilt threatening to drown me once more, but the shadows laughed, their chilling chorus weaving a hellish tune. Oh, sweet Hannah, do you not see? You are woven into their despair. They will never rest until you pay the price. Enough! I roared, though my voice quivered in the face of their relentless torment. With each breath, the darkness surged closer, pulling at the strands of my soul. I had to break free, to claw my way out of this twisted purgatory, but they were relentless. The surrounding shadows swirled, creating a vortex and drawing me deeper into its tormented embrace. Panicked, I turned to what felt like an exit, a remnant of light barely visible beyond. I raced toward it, heart pounding, but as I reached the threshold, I was met by a fragile figure, the spectral visage of Sarah, her haunting beauty marred by endless sorrow. Hannah, she whispered, her voice shaking with sorrow and accusation. You must accept us. You cannot escape what you owe. No! I shouted, feeling my last reserves of hope waning as darkness coiled around my ankles, threatening to pull me back into its abyss. I can't take this anymore. I felt the rage boiling within me, igniting against the tide of despair trying to crush my spirit. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath my feet, cracking open like a flower revealing its decaying heart. A surge of primal fear clawed its way to the surface as the shadows began to reveal things more grotesque than I could have imagined: twisted limbs, mouths that whispered my name in ghastly harmony. My breath caught in my throat at sights that should not see the light of day. A terrible realization struck me, a memory resurfacing that sent icy fingers down my spine. I had buried something deep, something I thought was long forgotten, my own darkness, my own secret that tied me to this malicious realm. Clutching my head, I sank to the ground, whispers rising and falling, a chaotic crescendo that rattled against my skull. The shadows pressed closer, the cries of the lost reaching a fevered pitch. They knew my sin. They knew my truth. In the depths of the tumult, I spotted a glimmer at the center of the void. It pulsated with a sickly light, radiating energy so potent that it seemed to turn my stomach. The shadows edged ravenously closer, their hunger escalating as if drawn to that very source. I couldn't bear to look away, compelled by an unseen force that threatened to unravel everything I thought I understood, and suddenly, amidst the tumult, the ground opened wider, revealing the depths of that pulsing light. A fissure tore through the darkness, illuminating an unspeakable horror that lay in wait. As I stood transfixed, the veil between what was real and what was festering in my conscious mind began to shred. The whispers grew frantic, an avalanche of sound crashing over me. At that moment, realization and terror collided, and my eyes widened as the truth clawed its way back to the surface. Then, without warning, an unearthly scream tore through the darkness, a sound that shattered my very being. I turned to run, but as I did, the shadows surged forward with a furious vengeance, their wrathful embrace coiling tighter around me, and the last thing I saw before everything imploded was that sickly glow reaching out, ready to consume me whole, as the darkness stirred in anticipation. The world twisted and spun as the shadows clutched at me, pulling me into an abyss that promised no escape, no hope. As the darkness thickened, suffocating my cries, I felt my body teetering on the brink of existence, a mere husk along the precipice. Whispers slithered around me, growing louder still, echoing the secrets I had thought forgotten. You belong, Hannah. Our depths are one. My heart thundered in my chest, drowning out the cacophony of despair. From the furthest reaches of my mind, transcending the tangible, came the flicker of a memory. A night drenched in moonlight, laughter that turned to sobs, and the last glimmer of betrayal. I gasped, the truth surfacing like bile, acrid and bitter. I had watched as Sarah's fate twisted in the hands of fate and cowardice. My inaction had sealed her doom, tied me inexorably to this netherworld that I scrabbled for purchase on the trembling ground, but the shadows swirled and twirled, a dance of malice that threatened to steal me away forever. The screaming intensified, melding into a singular voice that rang clear with my name. Hannah. You must face us. You cannot run from your past. With each breath of rancid air, I felt the weight of their eyes, strict, accusing, and hollow, pulling at the fiber of my sanity. I turned in circles, scanning the endless night for some means of escape, yet ahead loomed the gaping maw of that sickly glow, throbbing with promise and dread alike. Dread wrapped around my throat like a noose, tightening with every throbbing pulse from the fissure, whispering of an impending reckoning. My feet propelled me forward against the onslaught of shadows, a mindless drive toward the light promising release. But as I approached, the ground trembled anew. The fissure widened more, revealing a chaotic realm underneath, primal shapes writhing in silence, amorphous masses like a canvas of nightmares come to life, moaning and crying in agony. The encounter lured me desperately forward, its glow piercing through the veil of anguish like a beacon of salvation. Yet, as I breached the edge, a sudden flash of a face froze my heart, a visage twisted in misery. It was Sarah, trapped within the light, her eyes wide in terror, pleading for something more than despair, for answers I could never provide. The shadows flanked me, a choir of sorrow reaching for her, claiming she was ever so present, ever so lost. No! I screamed, the turmoil inside me spiraling toward a maddening climax. What they needed was not to condemn, but to understand. I lunged toward her, the flickering light bending at the edges, distorting reality itself as a shadowy figure emerged from the depths, its form cloaked in the malice of forgotten dreams. It rose, a beast wrought of both despair and longing, a grotesque amalgamation of all those whose lives I had altered. Faces morphed and twisted through its formless mass, visions of betrayal and chaos swirling in a maelstrom of pain. You knew, it voiced, a rasping echo that resonated through the very core of my being. You knew and did nothing. As it coalesced, entwining the faces I had forsaken, I felt shackles tightening around my limbs, pulling me back toward the chaos swirling below. Hannah, join us, it beckoned, a mockery of her once familiar tone, laced with malice and grief. Those cries captured me, an unbreakable bond crafted from the fabric of regret and terror. I could no longer see the boundaries of my own soul. I was merely a spectator caught in their vortex, unable to discern who begged louder, the cries of the shadows or Sarah's anguished silence within the luminous glow. Hardly able to breathe, I staggered back, desperation clawing at my throat. Release us, I begged, voice echoing among their roiling forms. Release her. But the figure surged forth, morphing into the very embodiment of my guilt, and with a malevolent grin filled with jagged secrets, it reached for me, an envelope of arms entwined with despair. The moment its icy touch grazed my skin, a jolt of memories flooded back, every moment of neglect and abandonment, every scream that faded before my very eyes, pulling me under the weight of despair. Then came a voice like thunder that tore through the shadows, resonating in a twisted web of sound that fractured the very ground beneath. Awake! The force surged, a wave of raw power sweeping across the landscape, fracturing the void itself with blinding brilliance. My vision blurred as I was hurled back toward the light, colliding with an unseen barrier, the echoes drowning in a cacophony of wails and shouts. You have to choose. But which way was forward, and what lay behind? As the shadows recoiled in spiraling patterns, an overwhelming dread filled my veins with ice. I stood paralyzed, my pulse pounding in crescendos against the fabric of existence. A fleeting glance to Sarah revealed her shaking head, mouth moving in desperation but words lost beneath the whirlwind. A hollow darkness slipped through the cracks, a cold breath against my skin. And then suddenly, amidst the chaos, a hand shot from the void, cold and ghostly, fingers stretching toward me, beckoning, with heart pounding in my ears. I felt the weight of choice bearing down. The pulsating glow intensified, blurring the lines between salvation and despair as the shadow pulled me closer, whispering promises of oblivion and clarity. I had to decide in that fractured moment. Would I plunge my conscience into despair to save the remnants of a past I could never amend, or plunge into that sickly light, leaving everything behind? But in the murkiness of my decision, echoed a chilling ultimatum: choose now, or they all perish with your silence. And as I held my breath, torn between fear and clarity, shadows surged forth with terrifying intent, ready to reclaim their due. Then everything went dark. When I regained consciousness, my surroundings were painfully bright, almost blinding. The air tasted strange, tinged with an artificial sweetness that clawed at the back of my throat, suffocating me. I blinked, willing my eyes to adjust, and slowly took in the scene around me. I was back in the Taco Bell, but it was different. Sterile, white walls gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. The familiar tables and chairs were gone, replaced by cold metal structures meant to keep people apart rather than together. I was seated at one of those tables, restrained with straps at my wrists and ankles. I jerked against the bonds, panic surging as realization dawned like a black cloud. What is happening? I screamed, my voice echoing against the walls. The employees, those I remembered with haunted faces, stood behind a glass partition, grotesque smiles plastered across their features, their eyes hollow and unblinking. Welcome back, Hannah, one of them said, her voice eerily cheerful, resonating through the oppressive silence. You're just in time for the grand opening of our new location, where each order comes with a free soul. Then came the whispers, rushing into my ears like a chorus of lost spirits, spiraling into a frenzy. Join us, they chanted, voices melding together in horror and ecstasy. Become one with the feast. You're back among your friends. Friends? I shrieked, fighting against the restraints. No. You don't understand. They're gone. Oh, they're here, all right, the girl continued, her smile widening, teeth glistening like knives. She pointed beyond the glass wall, and my breath halted as I saw them. Angela, Mark, Sarah, my beloved friends, stood in a line, every one of them drawn into a ghastly tableau, their forms resembling twisted shadows of themselves. Each held a Taco Bell bag, eyes dimmed, faces frozen in eerie grins, mouths plastered shut, but their bodies quivered with desperation. "What have you done to them?" I screamed, nausea rising as the truth settled deep within. "Nothing, they didn't choose," the employee replied, her voice saccharine yet laced with malice. "They opted to feed the darkness just like you will." I was trapped, cuffs digging into my flesh, and the shadows danced closer, pulsing with insatiable hunger. "They might have escaped," the girl continued, "but they chose to embrace the void. And now it's your turn." The lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness for a fleeting heartbeat. And then they returned, illuminating the grinning figures behind the partition, those lost souls forever bound to this place. In that moment, I understood the horrifying truth: the Taco Bell was just a facade, a thin veil over the chaos of hell below. "Come, Hannah," the whispers beckoned, echoing a sinister melody filled with pain and promise. "You are home." Terror consumed me, drowning all hope. I fought wildly against the restraints, screaming, pleading, but it was futile. I felt the pang of unmistakable fear settle in, wrapping its fingers around my heart. Surrounded by walls that had once felt inviting, I now felt the weight of an oppressive curse descending upon me. "Join us," my friends echoed, voices intertwining with shadows, turning them into a grotesque display of malice and longing. "We can be together forever." "Forever in darkness," I muttered, remembering the warmth of their laughter, the memories lingering like ghosts clinging to the corners of my mind. I bit my lip hard enough for the coppery tang of blood to trickle down my chin, but pain was a distraction I desperately needed. "Say yes," the girl enticed, tilting her head in delight. "You'll never suffer again." But at that moment, clarity struck. I wouldn't yield to this twisted reality. "I reject you," I screamed, feeling as if I were tearing through what I knew to protect myself from their insatiable hunger. In response, the shadows shifted violently, howling with rage. The restraints seemed to tighten even further, cold metal biting into my skin like the anticipation of death. I felt the energy around me start to warp as the voices crescendoed into chaos, a storm of fury and suffering twisting in on itself. "Hannah, don't you see? You cannot escape what you are," they shrieked, and with that declaration, everything began to spiral. At the very moment I thought despair would claim me, the darkness flickered. A shadow behind the glass panel rippled gently, pulsing with something akin to hope. There lay, faint yet undeniably pure, a struggle for freedom enduring despite the suffocating weight of despair. My friends' figures suddenly flickered, tormented puppets caught between two worlds. "Fight, Hannah." I heard Sarah's voice break through the veil, fragile yet unwavering, urging me to keep my resolve. "We're with you. Fight." And as I channeled that flicker of light, I felt the tension in my body snap. With a roar, I thrust my hands against the metal bonds, summoning every ounce of strength I possessed. The restraints shattered, and freedom flooded my veins like fire. I launched myself at the glass partition. But just as I did, within that nanosecond of grace, the shadows surged, and the ever-blank eyes widened, their mouths unhinging into screams of pure dread. I crashed into the glass, shattering it into a million shards of crystalline light that glimmered like stars, a gateway to the unknown. As I tumbled through, I tasted freedom for one bleak moment, absorbing the warmth of the world I had almost forgotten. The light engulfed me, and I felt the consuming dread release its grip. It was utopia or just another illusion, but I didn't care. As I turned to see their faces, distorted by the darkness seeping in, I shouted one final, desperate wish. "I'll come back for you." But maybe that was a lie, too. Maybe I couldn't save them, perhaps they would haunt me forever, each face twisted into masks of despair at the very thought of what they had become. Yet even as shadows licked at my heels, the warmth seemed to embrace me, igniting a memory worth 1,000 breaths I could never abandon. But deep inside, a voice whispered, entwined in the spaces between breaths that had once known laughter, "Not all shadows are meant to be escaped." As the darkness spiraled, I felt an unexpected chill cascade down my spine, a darkness lingering behind me, waiting, and then came the silence, punctuated only by the echoes of their cackling laughter, reminding me of the one indisputable truth: I had left them behind, but the shadows had not forsaken me, that I would never escape the lure of their hunger.